renovation to be done in 149th Street and 3rd Avenue in the South Bronx. So I'm just going to show a little bit of my artwork. I know I have a 10-minute presentation, so I'll keep it short. This is a piece that I did. One of the pieces or works that I've been doing lately is I've been embroidering on wood. And this is a 15-foot long Bronx River that I embroidered on construction plywood. And it's detail. A lot of my work, when I make my work, is a lot about history and memory. And I wanted also to talk about, in this exhibition where it was at the Bronx County Courthouse, I wanted to talk about revitalization and use my current process of embroidered wood to talk about revitalization in the Bronx. So the Bronx River being this wonderful revitalization, and this piece, South Bronx Gold Rush, talking about the gentrification and money that's flowing through the community that's not quite getting to the residents of that community. So I like making work based off of what's the feel in the community and how that relates to art and how best I can discuss what's going on in the community through my work. This is a piece of the Arctic Meltdown. So this was the Arctic ice that was mapped from 1979 to 2015, and it's embroidered on wood as well. This is a piece I did at Socrates Sculpture Park, and it's a 10-foot Burger King crown, and it had the adjustable tab in the back and everything. And she was 10 feet tall and about 30 feet. She was pretty long, and she all got together. This was Penance Benevolence Association, and it was a kneeler that I showed at SPAC Mellon in the Respond exhibition. And it was wooden paint, and it was a repurposed barrier. And this was Precarious Obsolescence of Independence. It's an ink transfer onto Silvy Putty, an entire actual size of the Constitution. Of the Declaration of Independence, sorry. So, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. So this is the site for Roberto, for the Para Roberto, which is right on 139th Street, which is known as the hub in the South Bronx. I've had family that's lived in that neighborhood for the past 50 years, and I've lived in the Bronx my entire life. So it's been really great to be considered this and to have my piece presented to you. So this is just an aerial view, and these are the before construction shots. So there's some construction shots later on, but this is looking southwest, looking east, and these are what the site photos look like now. Well, there's more construction going on now, and things are more finalized. So. Now the proposed work. So it's going to be sort of the dot at the exclamation point, so to speak. And I've been given an 8-foot footprint, but it'll be about 8 feet wide as we see, but it won't be as deep, the work. And there's the piece. So the idea behind the piece was I had wanted to give Roberto a place where he can be able to, he would have been 83 years old this past week, and I wanted to provide a place where Roberto, in his old age, if he was alive, he would have been able to give wisdom to the people of Puerto Rico, of his grandchildren, and so I wanted to create an abuelo chair, which is something my grandfather had, and I know a lot of abuelos have their chairs that they tend to sit in and give wisdom to, and I wanted to create it out of things that had inspired him, that were from his history, and that were a shared history of the people of Puerto Rico and of the Caribbean. So I wanted to talk about how when he was a young man, when he was a child, he would work in the sugarcane fields with his father, and he would dream about wanting to be a baseball player, and he would play stickball with his friends, and how that inspired him to keep going forward and eventually go into baseball camps and play baseball in high school, and his dreams just led him forward. So I looked into my own history, into the history of the Bronx, and I wanted to see what can we talk about and what are the shared histories of these people? And I thought about how much stickball is such a part of the Bronx. And a part of my history as well, my grandfather's in the Stickball Hall of Fame, and we would do lots of stickball events, and stickball still happens in the Bronx. So the chair is made out of stickball bats, baseball bats, and has the Puerto Rico flag. And it also has these 10 to 12 foot tall sugarcane stalks that are all made out of bronze. That is my proposed use of the metal, and I intend to patina the bronze and create a canopy. And the canopy is meant to keep the chair in the shade the entire time as the sun travels across the plaza. So the plaza, the chair will be sitting, the chair will be facing sort of northeast in a way that will keep the sun behind it. And so the chair will always be in constant shade due to the canopy of the sugarcane leaves. So, because it's all bronze, I wanted to make sure it stayed cool as well. So the canopy will then cover, and I have 21 sugarcane stalks to represent 21, which was his number, and that's a number that the MLB is trying to actually have retired across Major League Baseball. It's something that's out there. And it just happens to be the number of letters in his name as well, Roberto Clemente Walker. So this is my model that I made, and I just wanted to sort of show that I have these little accents of Spalding type stickball balls that have Roberto's name written on them. They'll all be entirely cast in bronze, so they'll be all patinaed in these bright colors, and the chair will have these accents. The black accents are the grips that would be gripped around stickball bats as you would play. So just these small accents to the chair of these colors. And then this is the sort of the overall dimensions of the chair, of the scale model, as well as the actual, apologies for that, and how the footprint would look. I wanted to create a wave of sort of a flag wave and how the sugar cane. I didn't want to create just a standard, just the sugar cane standing next to each other. I wanted there to be a sort of an undulation to it, very much like a flag, and that was my inspiration, to not just create sort of a standard arc. And this is a mock of what I think it would look like in the plaza, and how it would look like coming out of the subway. So as you come out of the subway on 149th Street, you would walk and see it directly in front of you. There'll be a plaque. I haven't decided exactly. I wanted to talk about the piece as well as a little about the inspiration and about Roberto's history, and I also wanted to make sure that the plaque was bilingual. So the actual wording I have yet to fully work on, even though I have it. I just want to make sure I have all the information necessary so that it explains the piece fully. As well as these would be the materials I would want to be able to use, the colors, and sort of, I put a Ron Barron piece down there because that's a casted bronze chair, and I wanted to show the different colors and patinas that can be used with the bronze. So you have an idea as to the vibrancy that this piece can really have. And I do believe this is the last slide. Thank you.
I have a question in terms of your inspiration. I'm familiar with your work, and to be honest, I was sort of surprised by the direction that you chose to go with the piece. I think that physically, direct connection. Were there other iterations or other proposals that maybe we are not familiar with that you can sort of explain your direction and choice
Of this
Yes.
direction? Well, I wanted to create, I know that part of this design and one of the parameters that were given to me that they were not looking for a specific statue of Roberto Clemente or something that was directly in that way. And so what I wanted to talk about was, I thought about his history, like how did he become the person who he is? And what are those factors that are among all of our lives that sort of affect us in our childhood that then give us the growth to where we go? So I thought about his age, I thought about him now and then, I thought about how, as I was looking through his history and trying to find parts of his history, I saw that he was very much a child, a poor child, just like my grandfather, just like a lot of our families coming from the Caribbean are. And I thought about how he was working in those sugarcane fields with his dad, and so did my grandfather, so did a lot of people. And that was such this very colonial thing that is shared among the Caribbean and other nations as well. And I didn't want to shy away from the idea that this was a hardship, because I do see the sugarcane as representing a hardship in his life, but I also see that baseball and the chair being this savior that saved him and gave him what he had always wanted, which was to go and play baseball and become who he was. But he never forgot Puerto Rico, and he died being the humanitarian that he was, leaving Puerto Rico to go save people in Nicaragua. So I thought about, he would be this amazing humanitarian right now. He would have continued his humanitarian work throughout the world, and I thought, like, you know, he probably would have been an older man who maybe he was sort of, you know, shuffling around a bit, and how he would have deserved his chance to be able to sit in his abuelo chair. He would have, at 83 years old, have maybe retired back to Puerto Rico and been able to sit in a chair and have his grandchildren and his family surround him, and he would dispense that wisdom of his life and the difficulties that he had as a child and how it gave him everything that he had now. And I wanted to make that chair from the things that gave him hope as a child, and how that chair sort of gave him hope into an adult. And so that's where the idea for this piece came from. I never really had another reiteration. In fact, the very first time I walked the plaza, I said to myself I wanted to see snow on top of the sugarcane. I was excited to sort of see this very surreal image of snow on top of this greenery, and provide people a place that they can sit in Roberto's chair, the chair that he built in a way, the pride that he gave Puerto Ricans, and the pride that he has sort of given the world, because he has the most statues of any athlete. He has a lot more.
I'm just asking because I know a lot of your work.
Yes.
And I think that you're using a lot of sort of Caribbean tropes, right, that everyone sort of associates with in Puerto Rican, which is, you know, to each his own. That's what you like to do, with some certain artists like to sort of present as sort of a cue on the web. It's sort of easily accessible. But I think your work is more, it's deeper than that, and I've seen how, especially with these sort of embroidered pieces on sort of permanent mason-like works in wood, I think there's room for that, even with text pieces, to share your strengths as an artist and sort of translate that in a public art piece. This does not look like you. It doesn't look like your work. And we picked you. They picked you, because you essentially have a certain aesthetic that they understood that was very sensitive to your history, but without being literal. So I would hesitate to say this is the best, or what I know that you can do. should be not just a testimony to him, but also to your artistic vision in this community, which I know you have a very strong presence in the community. So,
Well, I feel like my grandfather, a lot of my grandfather was in this piece too. And I feel like a lot of the stickball guys who I grew up with, because of my grandfather, are in this piece. Because of this piece, I was able to reunite with other stickball people who their grandchildren were finding us. And I wanted to do something, and I understand, and I thank you for your feedback. And I wanted to sort of also say that I know this community is changing right now,
yes.
you know, and it's going to change a lot. And I feel like the Puerto Rican presence may not necessarily be around in 10 years, or as thick or as deep as it has been, as I have known. And I feel like this neighborhood has always been a place of immigrants. This place has always been a place where Latinos and Puerto Ricans and just everybody has been. And I wanted to create a piece that says that this was Puerto Rico, this is Puerto Rico, and that you can have a little piece of Puerto Rico right here in the South Bronx, and that you can sit here and you could be reminded that Puerto Rico is a part of you. And that was the reason why I went in this direction. It's similar to my much older work when I first started making, where I was doing very direct imagery about Puerto Rico and roosters and golden objects, and I was very much there. And I was just very cognizant that this community was going to change, and I didn't want to do something that was similar to my embroidered woodwork. I wanted to do something that was going to be an homage to Puerto Rico in a way, and the history of that community. Because like I said, I know if this piece will be up for 20 years, that neighborhood may be very different in 20 years.
My concern is this piece, we hope it's going to be up in 100 years, and I don't see how that happens with the materials and the fragility of the piece as it is. I think for something that was indoor, I could see it working really well as a sculpture and an installation, and beautiful, but in this context, you know, a teenager just jumping and swinging on one of those canes is going to break it, and then, you know, in 5 years there'll be 3 canes left, and then the chair is going to be half broken, and I think that's the opposite of what you would want to happen. And I had a similar obstacle when trying to propose a public piece, and it's not easy when you want to make a certain kind of statement. So maybe, I don't know, maybe criticism of mine is maybe too simplistic. But the concern I really have is like, how is it, I don't think it's at all possible to expect that this piece will last 5 years in the state that it's proposed with the plaque. I think the maintenance alone will be will lead people to not take care of it to the degree you would expect. So, and I think there might be other ways with the poetry. I think the other thing about her work is that it's very poetic. That you could speak to stickball, you could speak to Clemente and the legacy, and like also the community, and maybe even to Puerto Rico. But I would just say that I think it's just, I don't, you know, the leaves, the concern would be like birds, you know, trying to nest in it, and then, you know, who's going to want to sit in it if there's birds pooping on you. So there's a lot of things like that that I think in an external context would make a piece like that this very, very challenging. So that's the thing that I think about most. That it seems very precious.
Could I address this? One of the things that, I'm Kendall Henry, the director of the one of the things that when we're looking at this piece is just that maintenance and durability. And with the materials that she spec'd out, it's actually really a conversation with us. And with solar, we'll maintaining the work. So we understand the concern, but we're very confident that the materials that we use is going to be very good.
You think that?
Bronze?
It's more just like, if I was a teenager and I saw that, I would jump on it.
Yeah, it's actually made to jump on.
Yeah.
And stand on, and so we're looking at all the issues too.
And the leaves as well?
Well, the leaves are not reachable. So one of the things that we had looked at is what happens if you stand on the back height of the chair, how much can you reach the leaves, and so, yeah, this is conceptual and all, but we are looking at all these issues.
Yeah, my concern would be like stuff that collects in the leaves.
Yeah, and so we have Sober here to hose it down, power wash and really take care of that. We can't do these kinds of projects unless we have a maintenance partner, and the reason why we are able to do this is because we have a really good maintenance partner for this. So it's, and we know it can't be
I mean, I just, it is nothing like anything I've ever seen, but which can be a good thing, but I just.
But yeah, so these are the things that we're actually looking at.
I think that you have a very specific language with the use of text and also line and embroidery. That is, I think, could be leaves, to be frank. I mean, I can see you doing so many really like conceptual pieces that would probably lend itself to more contemplative work, maybe text on the floor, maybe text on, something that would describe everything you're saying, but also allow for you to be the artist that that have to sort of maintain your vision as an artist as well. It's not, sort of revert to a motif that is sort of easily palatable. I mean, how am I being clear?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I went this route because I had wanted really to, truly when I first thought of this piece, this was what I had initially thought of. Like I do work conceptually, and as you saw, like I do have the embroidered wood, but then I also do other sculptural works. And this is my first piece, and it is a challenge to think in those ways. And I definitely wanted to make sure that the work was going to be something that was recognizable and accessible to the entire community. And I know how the community feels about stickball, baseball, and I just thought like this would be the best way to honor him, because everything about Roberto was, he felt like through baseball, if he could be the best player, that he would be able to then use his status to be able to help people. And I feel like that lesson is a great lesson to sort of have and sort of, yeah. So I understand the criticism. I just felt as though, even though I'm still working on my embroidered wood projects, I have yet to translate them to be an outdoor, even though that is something I'm working toward with rope and wood, it's not something I've mastered as technique where I feel as though I can translate to an outdoor work at this point. And so I wanted to use the bronze to be able to, because it also references the commemorative statues that are done all over the world of different athletes, just these bronze statues. So I wanted to use bronze in a different way to sort of, give the patrons a place to sit and it is a very much a selfie sort of thing where anybody could come and sit and take a photo of this and be a part of the work, because the chair is an oversized chair and I wanted people to be able to sit on it. But I do understand your criticism about it.
And I just want to add one more little thing about the process in this case. We had a huge, extensive community engagement process for this, because this is the third time we're selecting an art. And so we started having workshops with local artists. What we did in the end, when we had 5 proposals come in and various interpretations of Roberto Clemente from the statues and from very abstract representation, we had 3 different exhibitions within the community of all the pieces and asked the community to render some input to some of the artwork, and this is what they really picked. So I understand what you're saying, and there is a time when the artist has to figure out how to take what she does and really relate to something that the community could respond to, and so this is what we're very happy with it. But yes, we totally understand what you're saying.
I think what the narrative aspect of this part of it as well, that aesthetic decisions are really hard, and I understand the criticism, although, you know, I think it's a very poetic piece, and I think you've done a beautiful job in a difficult situation. There are 3 other people before you have not achieved what you have, and I think it could work beautifully. I do.
I am not of the community zone, but I do have some good memories about Clemente and what Clemente meant and how he was cut short in his life. And in baseball and after, and in his work, he was someone to revere and emulate. And he meant so much, not only because of his skill, but because he was such a humanitarian and had such an impact, and that's why he still counts. So, for me, just if I were going there, I understand what you have said about him in a way, the grandfather, and looking back, and for people to participate. I guess in communication of the work of art, which I don't know exactly, I would like to be able to connect, see more of that, of his life and what the impact, even as, if you wish, the grandfather in the chair, and I see less of that than I would appreciate and like to see, because he was such an important person who the legacy and the sense of who he was should continue. And I'm not sure about that. The second and last thing is, I don't know enough, but I take seriously, I appreciate what you said, the point about maintenance and it lasting. And I think that really needs to be evaluated very clearly and strongly in terms of, you know, and so we're maintaining it and so on, but I think it may be vulnerable. And I say that respectfully, but I think there are real questions about it. The last thing, which I'm not clear yet completely, so I need to look at it. I appreciate, I think I did see 60, is it the sugar cane is 60 feet high or 60? No, the chair.
The chair is 65 feet.
Yeah, the chair is 5 feet and the
21 at a time.
Right, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I did see that. So I see from this rendering that I think it appears to be, you know, visible and something that people can see without necessarily providing any kind of obstruction to anything else, but I guess I just want to be sure of that. I just say that tentatively, you know, just kind of look at it more in its setting.
Well, a lot of opinions have been expressed, but we do need to give Melissa a direction moving forward. I think that there seem to be a number of concerns about the sort of durability of the piece, which I'm sure will evolve as it moves forward. There was clearly one suggestion made that this isn't necessarily representative of your best or your sort of most conceptual work. I don't know. I mean, that would, obviously, if we were to suggest that you move forward in that direction, would be a completely thinking piece. I am sensitive, having been the longest member of this commission and seeing the other projects that have not succeeded. I think on some level the community deserves the piece of art that it's wanted for a long time. And you know, if indeed this has been well received by the community, and you can stand behind that as with assurance. And with all due respect, Mary, I'm going to say that we urge you to continue to refine this piece and just consider some of the suggestions that were made. And I think that perhaps in your text, and perhaps maybe the text is not a plaque, that you could evoke some of the other ideas that are in your mind and use that to be expressive of some of your more conceptual thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear there. I think both Mary and I think the work is strong, and that your work is strong, but there are concerns. I will, as I said, 100 years from now is where I think it, and I'm not sure if Sobro is going to be around 100 years. So I think to the degree that you can actually think about the long term, like when you're 80, you're going to come by and see this piece and you want it to look the same way, I would just try to factor that in.
I'd like to quickly support the point about the text or the story or whatever, and how that can be clear and depicted and integrated into the work of art so that it can be experienced. And I think that that would be a very important enhancement and point in what you are doing and what the community would like to see, perhaps.
I will definitely make that change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The project originated from the winning design from the HUD Rebuild by Design design competition, if you remember hearing about that. The Living Breakwaters project proposed a multi-layered system consisting of both onshore and offshore components. Today you're going to see the onshore component, and I'm going to turn it over to the team to make the presentation.
Thank you.
Alex?
Yes, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to the Public Design Commission for having us. I'm Alex Zablocki. I'm a representative of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. Nancy has already summarized why we're here, so I don't want to go over that again. This project came about through a community-based planning process, so the community was very involved in coming up with the scope of the project. We've been working closely with a Citizens Advisory Committee to refine design of both the onshore and offshore systems for storm protection on the southern shore of Staten Island. And today, again, we're talking about those onshore systems called the Tottenville Shoreline Protection Project. Led by 20 community members from Staten Island and elsewhere, this community process has sort of brought us to this point where we are today, very early in design as we lead up to 30%. And we're really excited to present to you today where we are in terms of design, working with Stantec as the designers and the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, and of course our partners with the city. New York City parks. Our office manages $4.4 billion in recovery aid statewide, and this is being funded both on the design level and construction level by the state, again, in partnership with the city. So I want to pass it over to Donna Walkavich from Stantec, who will go through the presentation.
I'm sorry, before Donna speaks, to what extent does this have to comply with FEMA regulations?
So this is funded through HUD,
Right.
Housing and Urban Development, so FEMA guidelines really don't come into play. We do need to look at what the federal notice has required of us in terms of spending money using HUD dollars, but it's not a FEMA-funded project or HMGP that you may be used to.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm going to run briefly through the overall project, and then Sarah Monquist, who is the project manager from our team, will go through the details of the specific onshore project. The project is located on the very south tip of Staten Island here, primarily in Conference House Park, although part of it also extends into a unbuilt right-of-way of Surf Avenue. It extends from just west of Swinnerton Avenue to just east of Page Avenue, and all the space is owned by the city. The outline here in dark orange is just a blow-up of the site, and primarily it is on the shoreline with some forested areas of the park also being impacted by design. It is, as Alex mentioned, it is sort of a twinned project with the Rebuild by Design project, and the shoreline here is the dividing line, if you will, between the two projects. The green space is primarily the area for the Living Breakwaters project, which is a system of breakwaters that slow down the wave action, minimize that, and the onshore component is geared to also reduce wave action and to reduce erosion along the shoreline. So they're separated in terms of projects, but in fact they actually work together with the living breakwaters in the water and the raised shoreline elements on the land. Originally this was called the Tottenville Dune project, but as we analyzed the site and we found that the dunes didn't work everywhere and there were better options, and we will walk through that. But overall, this layered approach has several goals. One is risk reduction. The other is to really support the native ecology of the area, especially and for the rebuild project in the water that is especially tied to the oyster population and restoration and the Billy Oyster project, and also culture. So there is a great deal of educational process going on throughout the planning and design process, but also built into the end of the project as well. So this is actually the original Rebuild by Design concept with the breakwaters in the water and the shoreline project. So the breakwaters are designed to support sea life. And also, one component of that is the water hub. That, in a way, the water hub ties the two areas together, because this is the water hub is the only component of the Rebuild by Design project that is actually on city property on parkland. And that will be an educational center and a way for people to access the knowledge that has been built up during this design process. As I said, the onshore project was originally conceived as a dune project, but we found there were areas that could support a dune, but much of the project area, the dunes really didn't work. Because one of the goals was not to fill the beach, so it was too narrow to support a dune that would be at any height that was meaningful. And in other spaces, they were really very much up against existing buildings. So Sarah is going to discuss the components of the project.
Great, thanks. So, as Donna mentioned, we began with this sort of very high-level study of can a dune system work along the entire shoreline for this community. The answer was obviously no, due to space constraints, and also the fact that one of the big goals of the project is access to the waterfront, both physical and visual. And you can see here as the dunes, even the smallest dunes, really sort of present a big problem design-wise from a visual access perspective, as obviously a physical access perspective. So what we did is we sort of did this initial study here, and we're kind of moving forward with the project, zooming in on this 25-year storm wave as a level of protection or risk reduction is really what we're pointing it, as opposed to protection, because this really was in sort of a phase of the project where we were deciding what is the objective. Is it to prevent flooding? Is that what we're doing? Can we do that in this community? Or is it to look at the identified problems for this community of wave action and coastal erosion, which have been a real problem for them for many decades? So we're looking at this 25-year storm, which puts us at sort of a level of protection elevation of 12.4. So you'll hear me mention that number as we move forward. And this is how we got here, and I can answer more questions about it as we move forward. But through that process and studying the actual site, we came up with the fact that these project goals for the onshore components are very much in line with the purpose and need stated elements. We're doing a joint EIS with the Living Breakwater team as well. So there's three main goals, and the first one being risk reduction. And what we're doing there for risk reduction is we're focusing on wave attenuation, both offshore and at the shoreline, and also coastal erosion and addressing those issues, because this community has been losing a lot of shoreline and beach for many, many decades. The other aspect, as Donna mentioned, is ecological enhancement. So we're looking at enhancing the ecological communities that are thriving there now and bringing new communities in as well. And then social resiliency, access and connection, both from the community and then along the shoreline, is a major component and goal of the project. So Donna mentioned the DOT right-of-way in this hatched area here that sort of snakes through. That's the DOT right-of-way. So we're aiming to stay on Parks property, but when we need to, because of space constraints, we can sort of move back inland along the DOT right-of-way. We did studies of, we have the Seehaw here, the Lemois line is back here, and you can see that we have quite a few tidal wetland issues along predominantly the entire site here. We've got some DEC wetlands, check zones that overlap as well. So we're studying all of those things as we move forward. Here you can see that most of what is adjacent to our site is residential. But what we do have is some really large tracts of open space and parkland that we can tie into. So that becomes a major focus for connectivity. I'll breeze through these. It's a very long site, so there's a lot to take in, but I think to note is here's Conference House Park on one end of the project. Here you see some temporary dunes that were put in place right after Sandy. Some of the big issues to notice are connectivity. The dunes that were put in sort of block this connection. You can see the park's benches buried in sand here. We have some outfalls at different street ends that we're dealing with. You can see that the erosion has really taken a toll on these temporary dunes that were put in. And this is the only segment of street right along here that was actually built out as Surf Avenue. Otherwise, the right-of-way is open. This is a revetment that we have to deal with within the project that was sort of illegally put in. The city is well aware of. That's a whole separate issue, but we will be addressing that within this project. So that's one of the design components here. And then this is sort of the other end of the project where you have a parks parking lot again, and opportunity to sort of tie into parks, trails, etc. So I'm going to move quickly, as quick as possible, so that we can get to your thoughts and questions. But what you see here is the existing circulation diagram and our proposed circulation diagram at conceptual design. So the big goal for circulation is continuous park access along the entire shoreline. We are still currently studying if that can mean ADA access along the shoreline this way. So the purple line you see here is showing that we will absolutely for sure have access. Depending on the types of materials that we land on, it will or won't be ADA accessible. We're having discussions with DEC as far as the pathways being in wetland areas and parks with maintenance and trying to figure out how to marry those two requirements together. But what we do see here is these ADA access points pointing to the major street ends here. So we will have ADA access points that will be either outlooks where people can come up to the top of whatever system goes in and experience the view, the visual access of out to the water. Ideally, we would like for it to all be ADA access, but really that's just a conversation that we're having as the design progresses. So, as we mentioned, it was a dune project proposed when we started this project in the very beginning, and it stretched this entire stretch here. Not only is the scope area of the project extended beyond the original scope area, but we're now looking at other systems. So there are essentially 4 design types that have emerged. One area is still sand dune, so it's a stone core sand cap dune, and it stretches right here. You see this darker yellow. The system then goes through a transition node, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, but the linear system sort of then turns into this earthen berm idea that snakes up through what is now a fairly well-established maritime forest that Parks is doing a lot of restoration work on currently, and we're working together with them to make sure that that works for them. On the other side of the dune, our footprint that's where it's at its narrowest, so we have a really small footprint to work within, so we're proposing some sort of revetment there. We're calling it an eco-revetment because we're studying different ways to sort of incorporate planting and therefore habitat and give what a revetment an even softer, more ecologically valuable edge. After the eco-revetment and this entire stretch of the project, two things happen really, and one of them is that the elevation increases, so the system of risk reduction that you need it becomes lower. The limit of moderate wave action is also closer to the shoreline, and therefore there are no residences within the limit of moderate wave action. So we're no longer looking really at wave action which will be impacting homes. So it's a different kind of a solution down there. What we're doing is proposing a raised pathway, which would both give a little bit of a level of protection, similar to the same level of protection for the rest of the system, but a bit of a softer, more subtle, nuanced intervention there. So here we just go through each design type real quick. The earthen berm, like I said, it sort of snakes through the forest. We were just out last week staking this out with Parks in the field, locating it in between trees as to not remove existing trees. And you can see here some existing and proposed sections. So currently what's out there is this temporary sand dune that was put in by Parks right after Sandy. We're proposing that that entire dune be removed, and then the area in front of the berms, the berm would be back here, this whole area would then be allowed to go back to a more tidal ecology, which it once was. So there's some major ecological enhancements here, and Parks is currently doing some maritime forest restoration here. And the idea is that the berm, you can see here is our berm, 25-foot wide maximum footprint. And this section is taken back here where it's dying into grade. So it's a high elevation here where the elevations are low, and as it snakes through the forest, it dies down into just a couple feet high and then lower and lower and lower until it just sort of blends in. The next system is the dune system. It is a stone core sand cap dune. So the idea is that the stone core being a permanent system, because we're well aware that the sand, you can't rely on it. It's not a natural sand dune system here. The level of protection at 12.4 that we're aiming for is the top of the stone core. The sand and the beach grass on top of it will be in addition to that. We're studying access here. Obviously, you don't want folks going up and over on a dune, so we're looking at, can we build some sort of up and over system for access, or is it going to be along this segment more about sort of traversing along the back dune on a pathway, or another goal is to make sure that there's enough space in front of the dune that folks can walk along the beach as well at mean high tide. The next system is the eco-revetment. This is something we're still very much studying. The idea is that it would have a much smaller footprint, and we would be putting in a sidewalk where there is none. So currently, you can see in the section here, there is a sidewalk on this side of Surf Avenue, but on the water side, there's just a stone, sort of drop-off stone revetment and then the temporary dune. So we're proposing that we put in a sidewalk on the beach side as well, and that would become part of our trail access. And then a bioswale along here, some sort of sloping up with planting, a pathway on top potentially, and then some sort of way to step down, incorporate planting, and then have some softer edge than the wall, obviously, on the water side. The last stretch is the raised pathway, and you can see here that we're looking at just coming up a couple of feet. And we would be incorporating green infrastructure, looking at where we can incorporate bioswales and rain gardens along this pathway to address some of the stormwater drainage issues. And I should say as well that we've been waiting for DEP data for quite a while, but a big part of this project is an extensive stormwater analysis and study to really analyze what's going on out there now, because there's existing drainage issues, and how this project will affect all of those things. They're not answers that we have yet, but they're being studied. As far as materials, obviously we're still at a very high level concept design, but this is something that we've taken. This is a Stantec job up in Calgary, Canada. This is different, it's on a river, so it's obviously a very different wave action climate, but this is the general idea.
Thank you. I can't give you popcorn. Come on. I just want to start off with an enormous thanks for the Parks Department, because this project is a little unique, as you can see. And when we approached them about the idea, they've been enthusiastic supporters and has shepherded us all along the way. So I'm very, very excited to be at this moment able to present this to you. So a little bit about Socrates. It is turning 30 years old this year. We are one of the precursors to what's commonly referred to as creative placemaking. Municipalities talk about artists and the community coming together for the purpose of regenerating something or reclaiming something. That is our history from Socrates Cultural Park, because it was originally a landfill. And artists came, reclaimed that, the community joined in, and now fast forward 30 years, we are the cultural anchor of this part of Queens. A little bit of context of where we are and who surrounds us. How do I point?
The middle
So we are right here at the juncture of Vernon and Broadway in Long Island City. We are right on the border of Astoria, so we straddle both communities. To the north is Astoria Houses, nice ship property. To the south, we have Ravenswood and Queensbridge. These are constituents that we serve through our programming. And in and around, immediately adjacent to the property, is a lot of light manufacturing that is now being turned over and converted into residential condominiums. If you go today, you'll see all sorts of building happening right on the border of the park. We are in the flood zone. The park was hit and submerged when Super Sandy came. So this informs a little bit about the siting of where we're going to place the building. But this is a sort of floodgate area. A little bit about the park itself and its social programming. So we estimate that we have about 150,000 people who come to the park every year. That's an estimate because everything we do is free, and we're open 365 days a year. So it's a very porous, open situation. About 40,000 of that 150,000 participate directly in the social programming that we provide, and 10,000 are youth that we provide arts education, arts experience for directly. Predominantly all of these activities are done outside. There is no indoor space at the park. I also want to mention that we have 50 other nonprofit partners for our programming. So we don't run the kayaking program, we host it, we partner with them. We have someone who has expertise in that kind of thing. So each partnership is either one-off or it's in depth over decades. Primarily though, we are a visual arts organization. We commission and produce public work. Everything in the park is temporary, comes and goes. Roughly the cycle is installing one exhibition that lasts for 4 to 5 months, and then we install another exhibition that goes through the winter, that's another 6 to 8 months. We're known very much for an emerging artist program that's supporting younger artists who may or may not have commissioned or done public work before, but we're also showing internationally renowned artists as well. A little bit more about the site and where we're talking about particularly. This is the southeast corner of the park. As you can see, there's a path here that goes around the perimeter of the park. And this is Vernon, and this is Broadway. So, street views, you would be approaching the park along Vernon, and here's the entrance to the park, as well as here with our billboard, which is always features an artist. From inside the park, this is a proposed site, adjacent next door to the entrance here. By the way, just as a note, our current offices are in this trucking building. We've been in those offices for about 10 years. It's a block-long building that every single tenant has now been evicted. We are the only tenant remaining in that building. And it will be converted to residential high-rises. Just a little more technical aspects about the site and why we chose where we chose. Just to orient you, this is Broadway, this is Vernon, this is the main entrance to the park. About 2/3 of our visitors come through that entrance. Just to your left, along this corridor, is where all of our other shipping containers are. So for many, many years, we've utilized shipping containers as a way to unpack materials and activate into our programming. But underneath that is a sewer outflow. Nothing permanent can be put on that corridor. So the reason we have shipping containers originally was that it's a demonstrable thing that we can actually pick up and move in case there was an emergency and they had to access that zone. Referring back to the earlier slide of the floodplain and Sandy, this particular location in the southeast corner is also the highest elevation of the park. It's about 9 feet. It is also adjacent to Vernon. So the utilities run along Vernon, so there's an easier connection for all sorts of utilities and sewer and water. So the site itself, contextually, these are the various other shipping containers and things that we use for the park, our education corridor. All of these are outdoor. These structures are just storage. They unpack with tools. We have an artist studio shed that provides cover and tools and a wood shop. Right here are the bathrooms that we provide on a temporary basis seasonally. And then to the right is where we're proposing the building is sited with pathways that connect to the existing pathway that traverses the perimeter of the park. A little bit more exploded. This is the, as I said, the main entrance. So in terms of pedestrian traffic flow, people come in here, they go to the left if they're doing the programming, and they would come to the right if there's a specific program that's being housed within the new building. Very quickly, why is this a unique project and interesting? The Whitney Museum commissioned Low-Tech to produce a shipping container building to house their educational programming. So if you came to the Whitney the past 3 years prior to the move, just to the right, the bar building in the moat was this structure. It was not open to the public, but they did have all their classroom activity in that when they had sold the brownstones and displaced that space. The Whitney approached us when they were preparing for the move and planning, would you be interested in this structure? Ironically, the timing is such that we have been talking about building for a very long time, and in fact, shipping container architecture, because of the existing shipping containers, was a genre and something we were going to pursue anyway. So we took the container. It's an existing building, and it is in New Jersey right now. It was disassembled on Madison Avenue, craned on trucks, and it's currently being stored. And we have worked with Tola, Giuseppe Legnano, Low-Tech, for developing a program of use and expanded it for our offices, having an indoor education space, and a gallery to show two-dimensional work that would then be connected to the three-dimensional work that's on view in the park. So I want to kind of turn it over to Ada, so she can kind of explain a little bit more about the design evolution and the specifics of that.
So I'll advance with this, I guess. So the original building, maybe we stay 1 second, the original building was a 6-container building that on the outside played also very much with the Whitney existing building, and on the inside was a very simple blank space for art education, as you can see in activity here. And when we started working with Socrates, we worked at the idea of thinking of that building as a module. So you see the initial module, and then the idea of replicating that module to create a larger structure, which is basically 3 times as big. It adds up to about 2,800 square feet, so it's still a modern building. And then the addition of an outdoor area that is basically a deck towards the park. So here you see an initial rendering. The building uses 18 shipping containers, as John was saying before. Not only there is the reference to the shipping containers that are already on site, but there is also a connection to the sort of history and mission of Socrates. Both the fact that Socrates was founded by Mark Di Suvero, who's an artist whose work is very much founded on steel, and then also the mission of adaptive reuse, which is very much at the base of our work. So the containers are all upcycled containers that have had quite a long life before they get turned into this new life of the building. In this image you see also the outdoor deck, and it gives a little bit of an initial idea of the siting, the direction of the open spaces and the windows towards the park. As far as program, as John was saying before, the program is really three-folded. There is the administration, the housing of the offices, and then there is the idea of education and exhibition, art education and exhibition. So basically the possibility for Socrates to run programs indoor, which doesn't exist right now. So the space is very, very simple. There are two entrances. So there is an entrance right here, which is the main entrance looking at the park. And then there is a rear entrance. And with the exception of the bathroom courts, the space is all open to be adapted to both. And then a stair, there is a pier, takes to the second level, which is all open and houses the offices, a communal work table, and again, the possibility of being used in a flexible manner. There is only one area that is open to below, so the two spaces are in connection. This is a roof plan where we're showing also an idea of a desire for the building to be green, so either with green roof or with solar panels. Here we're showing solar panels that you can see here in the space between the skylights. So the other thing in connection to the flooding, the building is now lifted about 4.5 feet, and we are definitely thinking about some sort of berming to reconnect the landscape to the landscape of the park. The elevation, where you can see the diagonal fenestration, I can show you also another connection that we found and we thought was pretty interesting. So you can see the container doors, the logo, the new logo of Socrates onto the building. And then as far as materials, together with the container itself and also the choice of color, which is very much about the oxidized iron that is very much present on the site, and there is the intention to retain a lot of the materials that are existing on the site. So the stone path will be, the ADA path that we're creating will be very much like this. The deck will be a cedar deck, very much like the deck that they have at the moment. And then there are a few renderings that show the building set within the facility. This is right at the entrance, and then as soon as we enter, you can see there is a faster connection through the step. You can also see the berming at this point, and then the longer ADA ramp instead that proceeds in the other direction. The logo, of course, of Socrates, visible also from Vernon. And then a view from the long path where the container facilities are right now, and most importantly the shed, which is the shed that Mark Visugaro built. We thought it was very interesting to find both the color and the diagonal being a recurrent theme, so we thought that the building fit the context really well. And here is a final rendering, which again shows the deck and the windows very much oriented towards the park.
Fabulous. This is great. This is really, as a piece of architecture, I've always admired your work. This is really beautiful. And obviously there's a need, but it's I think a really beautiful example of how function and need come together to produce something that's really better than that. Fantastic.
I did want to mention with the Whitney donation, worked in museums a long time, just because someone offers you something doesn't mean you take it. This happened to be a really very interesting opportunity that aligned with our interests anyway. So we've been able to take that, and I do think it is a game changer for Socrates to have the ability to go inside and not have to cancel classes or programs, and then also control our destiny as an arts organization. As development is happening in and around us, this will allow us to remain in the park for futures to come.
All the way around, it's really extraordinarily thoughtful and beautiful. Definitely on the commendation list. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're speechless.
Their architect from Rossetti missed his leave from Detroit and didn't get in, so Danny's going to do the presentation.
Good morning to all. As Nancy mentioned, John was devastated. He sat on the runway in Detroit yesterday afternoon for about 3 hours before they turned the plane around. Apparently the plane's going flying to LaGuardia, the threat of rain on one plane. So he sent me a bunch of notes, and I'll do my absolute best. As I just started to mention, this is what will be the final project within the transformation series of projects that we've been presenting now for 5 years, believe it or not. So some of you have had the opportunity to see many of these. This dates back to 2011 when we were before the commission for our Court 11 building and building that the commission just mentioned, Outbuilding 22B, the Heineken Red Star Cafe, were the first 2 projects, and then the West Campus transportation building, the roof over Ash, and the chiller plant, the Grandstand Stadium, and the entire South Campus. So Outbuilding 22 is the last on this list. The retail and sponsor building, for those of you who don't know, we presented the totality of all of these projects to the commission back in 2011 and 12 in order to get the groundbreaking done so that the commission would understand the intent of the entire project, the materials that we'd be using. This was the last project. We haven't even begun design on this yet, whether or not we're even going to fund it to be able to build it. So I would consider it part of the transformation only because we've shown it to the commission years ago, but I really have nothing to even talk to you about at this particular point in time. The building we're talking about is right over here. This is our South Plaza area, the entrance to Arthur Ashe Stadium, the main entrance. This is that Heineken Red Star Cafe, one of the early projects that we had shown. This is what we're opening up for the 2016 open, which starts tomorrow, and the South Campus. So everything in green here and this blue court is all brand new. This was a 2011 project. This opened in 2013, and the roof obviously is going to be ready for this week. And then Louis Armstrong is a project we're breaking ground on this fall, as well as the ticketing office. The premise of these two, there were 2 exact shaped buildings, 40 by 40. This has always been a Heineken Red Star Cafe. This has always been a merchandise pavilion for Nike for several years. And the intent here was, back in the 90s when Arthur Ashe Stadium was built, everything was about the red 8x8 brick. And we had made a promise to the commission when we were doing all of this work that while some of the big structures, the sports stadiums, might still encompass the red brick, that we would look at these smaller buildings as follies. And Heineken was the first of those series of follies, viewed from a different image. It's dark, it's tired, it's old, it's ready for a bit of an evolution. And this image with Ash in the background. These have always been a little bit of a belly-up operation, as we say on the retail side. The other thing about this building, because of its square nature, it kind of cut off the throat of the passageway. Most of our fans, almost 85% of the fans coming through the East Gate because of the passerelle and the traffic from Citi Field as well as the Long Island Railroad and the 7 train. So as people navigate their way through the site, we work to this South Plaza area. And so hence the shape of what we wanted to do here was to open up this throat that much more, and we really feel strongly that the new building does that. So you see the traffic is going back and forth all day long. It'll go through here to get to the grandstand and other areas of the site. It'll go that way to get into Arthur Ashe Stadium. The structure itself at 2 stories. The first floor, you'll see the bulk of it is a display area. What we do now with our car sponsor Mercedes currently, they have a couple of freestanding booths on the site. We're trying to get them inside so that they're not taking up any of the open space. So this will be a car display area during the tournament, back-of-house operations for mechanical equipment and for their staff. And then up on the second floor, since we're trying to get elevated as much as we can, will be another cafe that will flank the Heineken Red Star on the other side. With a kitchen on the back side, big seating area, all open to the grounds, to the plaza area. This is the South Plaza area is down here. And then the big walking area that we were just talking about. And then this is our main food village, seating area for the food village. The materials, you'll see the storefront glass that we started using when we built our indoor training center in 2009. So the storefront glass, same exact setup as Heineken Red Star. The metal panels that we're looking at, which you see right there. These are metal panels that we're using on all the buildings that you saw for the South Campus. And then because of the size of it, Rossetti has chosen to introduce a little bit of the charcoal in some areas. You'll see it right over here. The shape of the Heineken Red Star has got that backside. It has a true back-of-house operation that kind of envelopes the building. And this is really much more of a 3-sided building because in any direction people are walking around it. So we really didn't want to have a real backside to it. There are some back-of-house operations here where it'll be a different type of glass, shaded glass. and you'll see the introduction of the spandrel glass here on what would be the back of house operation, and that darker charcoal metal panel. So you see the storefront glass, similar to everywhere on the campus, especially on what's on our building 7 and 11 that flanks the south campus. And in the case here, because of the car displays in the south campus, we have 2 of our food operations where they have these kind of garage door glass structures. So we're going to do the same thing here. This will be an open car display area here. So this rolls up, plenty of height in here. The materials as far as pavement around here, it's all in place already, so we'd just be replacing in kind with everything that we've been using on the other transformation projects over the last couple of years. Showing this is the materials from the Heineken Red Star Cafe. All of our broadcast buildings on the site use the same metal panels. So the previously mentioned Heineken Red Star, you can see the curvature of what we do. This is replicating what's on the back side as you see it come around here. This is a true back of house for Heineken, but we still use the glass around all 4 sides of the building. So the placement of the building is right over here. So these 2 new structures, what we call building 7 and 11, this is 7 and 11, are flanking the campus around the fountains, the Heineken Red Star Cafe, and this. So these are the 4 anchors in the South Plaza area. Just a view from the park to reinforce the fact that this is something that's really embedded in the middle of the campus, and you wouldn't see it from any of the 4 sides of the outside of the park. With Louis Armstrong and with the structure in the background that you can't even see from this angle because of the being blocked by building 11. So this is a view of the new structure from the South Plaza area with Louis Armstrong in the background here. And I was mentioning, this is building 11, so this is in place for the 2016 open. Our intent would be that we can build this building for next year, subject to approval, obviously, but it's just something that complements the infrastructure of what's being built around the campus. And then this is a view from the east side working its way towards the south campus. And as I was mentioning, because of the old shape, the square would have been creating the bottleneck here, which goes away now. We have a much wider opening to get people into the south campus area. You can see the garage doors right over here, and then the glass lining the rest of the building. That is the project.
I think the footprint is a very good move. Can you go back 2 slides? That, sorry, the right. That looks pretty unfortunate to me. It's like Zaha Hadid meets USTA. And so the idea here is to create kind of in other words, I'm trying to figure out how aggressive that roof really is, or whether it's the angle from which I'm seeing it that is shading the outdoor patio.
And I don't want to downplay it. It's not aggressive. I would definitely say it's the angle because it's something that's always been. I didn't want the roof to overwhelm the structure. It comes out here. It looks like it's sticking out 20 feet, but it doesn't do that at all. It really is just coming off the building slightly. And maybe what we have to do is the model's got to get you some additional imagery so that you can see what I've already been convinced is not the case. But I couldn't agree with you more that at first when we were looking at this, that it felt like the roof was more imposing than the building itself and the feet.
I mean, it didn't look that imposing from the section, or actually the elevation, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But that angle is unfortunate. It looks like a sharp.
And matter of fact, you even see in the model here, you see a little bit here, but I know for a fact this is not the case because this is a big walking area here. So there's some work that needs to be done there.
So let's go to maybe those elevations that had the materials. So it's back a bit. Right, so there, that's, and then maybe the one back one more. Yeah, there, that.
This is the section.
This is conceptual?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Okay, so I think you heard the
Yes.
concerns, and so.
Absolutely. Great.
Thank
you all very much.
Thank you. Good luck next week.
Appreciate it.
Okay. public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. Items number 25857 to 25881. Item number 25856 has been withdrawn. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by various committees. Staff has noted Commissioner Aaron's recusal from 25873 and Commissioner Bartos' recusal from item 25880. Are there any other recusals that are not noted? No, let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, no members of the public have signed up to testify on the consent